All right, folks, welcome to today's webinar. If you don't know me, my name is Justin, and I'm on the internal clinician team here at the DNA company. And tonight, we've got a pretty important topic coming at you. We're going to be talking about the genetics behind women's fitness and nutrition. And I think it's an important topic because women, well, you make all the humans, right? You do. So it's a very important topic. It's important for you to stay fit. It's important for you to be healthy and vital. And just like anything, our genetics are able to kind of steer us in the right direction when it comes to how we go ahead and implement a fitness program or how we implement a nutrition program. You know, this is an alignment process. I talk about DNA like this is our instruction manual. And if you happen to be trying to get fit and maybe a little bit frustrated with how it's going, perhaps you're out of alignment with how that baseline factory setting manual is set up for you, right? So the DNA 360 that we have at the DNA company is a really valuable tool for ensuring that you're actually operating in alignment with that. I call it alignment with your assignment, right? These are different ways that we can make sure that you're eating the appropriate amount of fats, carbohydrates, that you're not overdoing cardio, that we have enough weight training. Your genes tell us a lot of different ways about how you can actually get the most results. Someone who knows a lot about results is my esteemed colleague here, the jacked and powerful Felicia Bruno. Let me just say, Felicia's been working extremely hard with our DNA Fit program. She is an IFBB Pro, which is a massive accomplishment and difficult to do, and recently acquired the FGP certification herself. So now we're able to talk about genes and fitness together. Felicia, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. These are one of my favorite topics. I love to talk about women and health and fitness and hormones and everything that goes into it. So I'm so glad to be here. I think we're going to have some really good conversations and some deep dives into some really cool, interesting stuff. And I'm just really glad to be a part of it. I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And the topic of fitness is like one of those things that you really can't over talk about. It's funny in the online space, a lot of people say that coaching is this saturated market. And I go, well, how is it possible that there's not enough coaches if we still have so many people running around with health issues, right? Like there isn't enough coaches as far as I'm concerned. We need more coaches. Until every human on planet Earth is absolutely healthy and vital, we still have work to do. And, self-care, self-love, really self-investment is the best form of that. Every moment that you spend working out or putting time into eating a healthy meal, it's a form of self-investment, and it does elevate you as a person. I'm curious for you, Felicia, like how, because you've been doing this forever, obviously training and nutrition. Bodybuilders, if you guys don't know, there's different phases, right? You have to build muscle in a particular phase. You have to lean down. There's maintenance phases involved. I'm curious now that you, Felicia, have had a chance to really dive deep on DNA. How have you changed your approach, like just for yourself, but then also perhaps for your clients?
Yeah, well, so when I was competing in the past, not knowing anything, yeah, it's a trial and error. It's like, okay, and you're right, we have to bulk up and we have to then slim down, and then there's a maintenance, and you're exactly right, all the above. And with that comes obviously different workout regimens, different food protocols, and how you place it within that time frame of whatever you're trying to achieve is exactly what you're going to get out. If I would have known then what I know now about how my body works, how my DNA, when it comes to especially carbs and protein, we always know protein, how vitamin D, do I need it? Did I not need it? It was literally a blueprint for me. Some things I was like, yeah, okay. But when it came down to exercise, it also told me that, okay, wow, I don't have to do as much cardio as I was doing, and it was killing me because my DNA is now built that way. Now, did I attain it? Yeah, but I probably could have attained it a whole lot faster, my placement in competing, if I'd have had the blueprint and I would have known, right? So it is totally a roadmap, and I'm 1000% thankful that we have this ability to gather this information about each one of us who are all so different, and how it looks different for every single woman and man. But women, it's oh my gosh, what do I do and how do I do it? And we look at we're constantly looking at the next woman. Well, how do I get like that? And how do I do this and that? And one thing doesn't fit all. So the DNA test really nailed it down for me.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I altered the way that I supplemented in different things as well, because I choose to operate in a way out of alignment with my DNA, which is funny because I train a lot of boxing, and it's just inherently really cardiovascular, and it's not something that my genes particularly love because I have a suboptimal SOD2 pathway. So I don't really detox those free radicals at the level of the mitochondria very well. So once I learned my DNA, I was like, okay, I'm faced with a choice. I can either stop boxing, which I'm not going to do,
Right.
or now that I know, I can put interventions in place so that I continue to live the way that I like without having some downstream health consequence. Right. So I started getting really religious about things that help detox the mitochondria. I still keep doing what I was going to do anyways, but now I've got this layer of defense because I know that I need it, and I didn't know that I needed it before, right? So now I use hydrogen, water, and carbon 60, like different peptides and things to really help clear those toxins. And
Mhm.
it's so funny, like I didn't know that it was important. It would have started to show up had I not known. So it's not necessarily about, well, now I can't do cardio because my genetics say so. We just need to know if your genetics say so that we can put those interventions in place or not. Um, so that being said, I mean, we do have a poll that we pulled up and we asked a few questions. So I'll give everybody a minute to go ahead and answer that. Well, there's a question quickly that I'll answer while you guys are doing that from Dr. Juliana. She said, "What is hydrogen water?" So hydrogen water is effectively, it's water that has been infused with hydrogen, which has these really selective antioxidant properties. And it's selective to something called the NRF2 pathway, which is really specific to the mitochondria. So, when we train, I mean, you're a doctor, you know that we produce all of these additional free radicals in the mitochondria. So they really get gummed up with toxins, and it can have a pro-aging effect, right? So it can make your cells kind of age at an accelerated rate. It can lead to the graying of your hair, a lot of different things that I did not want. So guzzling hydrogen water once or twice a day is among my strategies. If you look in your DNA 360 and you do have suboptimal antioxidation, which is separate from glutathionization, there's a couple things we look at, then it's one of those strategies. Yeah, it's one of those things that we use. I recommend checking it out. Um, do we have the poll up yet? There it is. Interesting. Okay. So let's go through this a little bit here. So the first question we asked is, do you currently work out regularly? And I'm happy to see that the majority of you, 56%, said yes, 3+ times a week. That's great. And then 25% said once or twice, and then 19% said no. The second one is, have you done your DNA 360 and examined your fitness and nutrition reports to adjust your lifestyle accordingly? And the majority of you said you have not, actually. So 42% have not done the DNA 360 and or just haven't adjusted your lifestyle. And 39% of you said, yeah, you've done the test and you've made some changes. So I'd be curious in the comments if you want to talk about that a little bit, like how you did change things and if it actually did any results for you or not as of yet. That's what we'll be talking about today. Number 3, are you currently or have previously worked with a professional on a fitness program aligned with your DNA, right? So that would be someone like myself, someone like Felicia. We really pair all of our recommendations to that DNA 360. So we know that you're in alignment with your assignment, like you mentioned. And a fair amount of you haven't yet. So that's good. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that with a number of you after tonight. 88% said no and 12% said yes. So that's good. Shout out to the 12% if I was among your practitioners. The last question that we asked, sorry, we've got 2 more. is, are you currently or have previously worked, or sorry, I just did that one. Do you feel like you've tried many avenues and strategies to improve your fitness and nutrition, but are feeling stuck / not seeing improvements? And yeah, I mean, it's almost 50-50, right? So 41% said yes, 59% said no. I think that's one of those things, Felicia, that it's like all you have to do is follow the wrong influencer on Instagram or whatever and walk down a path and find out that it's not for you. I think that's why we do what we do, is because we have the capacity to say, these are all solid strategies, but this one is probably more solid for this individual, and this one is probably more solid for you based on X gene. So that's one of those things that we look at. We personalize this because all of these diets probably have some efficacy. And that's something that we don't see a lot on social media. People will say, well, keto is what humans need and it's for everybody and regardless, or paleo or carnivore or vegan or whatever it is. I do believe that most of these diets, if not all, have some level of use and a place, but we need to find out where on that dietary spectrum that you kind of belong. Felicia, do you agree with that?
Oh, I totally agree. I see so many influencers or people on Instagram that they're like, first of all, they show you a picture of themselves and they're lean and they're fit and they're like, yeah, I do keto, or yeah, you're right, I do carnivore, and I think that it does work for some people. I mean, it's obvious it does, and I think there is some validity to it. But I also know that there's a lot of people that it doesn't work. We don't all fit in one category. And to look at somebody and want to be like, oh my gosh, I want to look like them, is not always the best choice for us. But I do believe there is a choice for us and there is a path for us to get where we want to be if we know what we're doing, right? And if we know the path and what we're supposed to eat and what supplements are we supposed to take, and how does my body feel? How do I feel on the inside and how do I feel on the outside? How am I sleeping and thinking and head to toe, right? So yes, I love social media and I hate social media because it's very entertaining, but yet it's also can take you down a deep dark hole that you're like, oh, I can't achieve that. Well, maybe just not that part's for you, but there is a part for you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I agree with you totally.
Yeah, and it might not necessarily have like health consequences that are too major, but it's really interesting when we speak about like potential, be it, just physical performance potential. If we were to take, in Usain Bolt is like one of the fastest humans
Oh
on
yeah.
planet Earth,
Yeah.
right? And that's a professional sprinter. So that's someone who does explosive training every day of their life for years and has to have a certain genetic potential to do that. What if Usain Bolt had just decided to spend his whole life doing shot put instead, right? He, with his mindset, he probably would have been okay at it, but there's no way that he would have achieved the level that he did for Olympic sprinting because that's what he's really designed for. He's meant to do that. He's meant to explode off that gate and be one of the best in the world. So it's an interesting thing when we talk about genetics and what you're wired for. It doesn't mean you have to live your life that way if your mind is calling you somewhere else, but how far do you want to really get with your results? I would argue that if you're operating in alignment with your DNA, you're going to get the best results possible. And if you choose not to, we still need to find interventions to make sure that there is no health consequences to the way that you do choose to live and the way that you do choose to train. So within your DNA 360, I mean, there's a lot of things that Felicia and I will look at if we were to, let's say, onboard you and start talking about fitness. So among those would be, like I mentioned, the SOD2 pathway. I also look at a gene called 9p21 when it comes to this cardio conversation, because you can do a heck of a lot of damage to your cardiovascular system without knowing it if you were to say do a lot of marathons when your body's not wired for that. 9p21 is really associated with the density and the toughness of that endothelium. Your blood vessels is actually lined in a certain way. So if it's really thin based on the 9p21 gene and you choose to be a runner, I mean, just your whole life run and run and run, you're going to be causing a lot of little tears and inflammation along the lining of that endothelium. And the heart is interesting because it's kind of a demand organ. Like if you train your biceps, you're going to feel that point of exhaustion. The burning is going to take place, and you're going to know when your muscles have reached their threshold, that lactic acid threshold. They're going to be burning so bad that you can't do it anymore. The heart, on the other hand, you don't feel it in the same way, right? It doesn't burn with lactic acid when you've overtaxed it. It just gives you what you ask of it. So if you're going to try to run a 20K, it's going to give you what you need to do a 20K. So that's why we have to look at these kinds of things, because the way you choose to train is going to matter for your longevity. What does your current kind of fitness regimen look like now that you've done your DNA 360, and how have you kind of altered it from maybe a few years ago when you didn't have it?
I still love to lift weights. I think it's just bred into me. That's it. But I do lift a little different. I still do cardio. You have to do it all. You have to do it both. Even though my DNA says I don't have to do as much, you still have to do cardio. You still got to move. That's the biggie. You have to move, right? So I lift for longevity, and I lift for obviously being older, in menopause, post-menopause, and osteoporosis. I lift for bone health and overall wellness. So it has changed a little bit. I don't lift as heavy as I used to, because the goal is different. The goal is to add as much muscle as I could. Now I still want to keep the muscle. So yeah, that now looks different, but I still enjoy all of it. And the eating has looked different. The eating also, because it's 80% of it. So now that I know my DNA test, my eating has changed, which then affects how my workouts are. And it all goes hand in hand. When I look, say I have a client that comes to me and says, okay, I want to lift, or I want a woman. And I said, okay, so I go through their DNA report, and I first kind of look at their sleep. How do they sleep? How do they recover? I look at the recovery gene. Do they recover well? Do they carry, the gene that they have two copies that they can like recover really quick? So they could do legs on Monday, arms on Tuesday, you know what I'm saying? They could do continuous, or do they need a break? And your genes will tell you. So you don't, do they do legs on Monday, and then Wednesday we're going to do arms, and then Friday we're going to do shoulders? You see what I'm saying? That's what I love about the DNA kit, because it tells you exactly how you're made. I have clients that come to me and are like, I'm lifting, but I'm so tired. I'm so tired all the time. Well, we look at everything, but okay, how do we know? If we don't know your DNA, how do we know? So then we have to kind of go back to the drawing board. But if we know, we know. And also I look at methylation. And I mean, the whole thing makes this beautiful picture of how well you can lift and recover and thrive and grow and change. And I too have used all my DNA to look at that, and it has made beautiful, beautiful changes for the better, even now that I'm not competing. It's remarkable.
Yeah, that's what's so fun is like even later into your lifting career, you can still find these little things. And there's so many little hacks. Like when I'm with my patients, I'll look at things like, for example, the androgen receptor. So in your hormone, fitness, and body type profile, it'll just say AR. There's another one called AndroX, and it's associated with that androgen receptor. So some people have a suboptimal receptor for the androgens in their bodies. And if I look at that and someone tells me that they're struggling to put on muscle, I'll be like, well, that's probably one of those factors. So I'll actually find some ways to kind of activate that androgen receptor. So I'll suggest, doing more leg training, because there's a lot of androgen receptors in the legs. Or I'll say, let's do something called slow negatives, which is basically the eccentric portion of the lift, right? So there's concentric, which is when the muscle is shortening. And then there's eccentric, which is when the muscle is lengthening. So for example, a down phase on the squat, while you're lowering, the muscle is lengthening. If you actually slow that portion of it down, you actually activate the androgen receptors way more than you would have if you were going quick on the way down. Not to mention the eccentric portion causes more myofibril breakdown as well. So you'll get more muscle mass via two different pathways. But this is an example of one of those little hacks. If I look and I see, oh, the androgen receptor is suboptimal, let's change the way that you lift now. Let's do more leg training. Let's do some kettlebell swings. Let's do some things that are going to, on purpose, activate the androgen receptor. And if
Yeah.
you do that, I've had clients that are like, man, I can't believe how simple of a hack that was. And here we go. Now my androgen receptor is working better. You can't really add more, but you can make it work better and respond better via the way that you live. So there's a lot of little fun things that you can do once you know that pathway. Um, the hormones in particular are going to be very important for females who want to work out. We need to know how much testosterone do you make in the first place. This kind of relates back to people talk about mesomorph and endomorph and ectomorph,
Yeah.
and for the
Body
most
type.
part, yeah, they just kind of end the conversation there. And well, I'm an ectomorph, or I'm a mesomorph, or I'm an endomorph.
Yeah.
Interestingly, your sex hormone pathway, it's called steroidogenesis, plays a really big role in how that actually manifests, right? So, like, if you have a balanced profile and you're not making a heck of a lot of testosterone or estrogen right off the bat, you're actually probably going to have more of an ectomorphic look to you. You don't have a lot of estrogen, nor do you have a lot of testosterone. So, it's going to lend itself to that kind of just thinner, smaller bone density kind of a look. If you have what we call an androgen dominant profile, which means you make a lot of testosterone and then it steers toward androgens via the SRD5A2 pathway, you're going to have that mesomorphic look, right? That Jason Statham, that friggin' jacked as well as lean. You're probably going to have some other things that we can talk about health wise if you get into one of our programs, because there's up and downsides to all of these things. But you're going to have a mesomorphic look to you. If you've got more of an endomorph type of a physique, you're probably a little bit more estrogen dominant, right? So you're going to be a little bit thicker. There may be some more water retention, but there is going to be some strength and some positives there as well. So that's kind of my take on those three body types. It's related back to this steroidogenesis pathway. So know it, go into your DNA 360 and know what you're looking at, because now we can go ahead and tailor it and we can mess with it and try to get more androgens and less estrogens and less toxic byproducts via supplementation, etc. So that's one of those things that I look at. Do you look pretty heavily at the hormone pathway?
Absolutely. Especially
Yeah.
with women who are postmenopause or menopausal,
Yeah.
even girls who are having a regular cycle, because hormones for women, they'll go like this. Men are more, stable,
Yeah.
but women, and let's say you start your period, day 1 through 5, day 5 through 10 is like beast mode. That's when women have the most testosterone in their body. And then it starts to decline. And most women will always say at the very, like, you just know when you're going to start because you're tired and you're sleepy and your hormones, the progesterone is like, it's upping. So it's making you tired. Now you still work out, but you're going to be able to have more strength at the beginning of your period than you will at the end. And it's all hormonal. So if you know how to exercise during that, it really helps you understand so you don't get so frustrated, like, because I know so many women don't get it and they don't keep up with it. Like, why am I tired? Like we talked about earlier, right? So yes, I always look at the hormonal part. And then if they are postmenopausal, it's the different things we still got to look at. Where is your estrogen levels? Where's your thyroid at? Where is your test levels at, and where's your progesterone levels at? And we train differently. At that point, we need to train. We then need to look at supplements. We need to look at calcium, folic, intake. We need to look at how is their bones. We need to work on bones. So hormones are so important. And another thing that I love, even when it comes to hormones, it also tells you a lot about your hair, right? Women, they're like, why is my hair getting thin and why is it falling out? Well, your hormones will tell you a lot about that. And your skin, when you lose estrogen, your skin just looks totally different. So there's a lot to it. But once you put it all together, it really functions very well. But yeah, we're not as blessed as you men to have testosterone, which I know y'all lose some of it, but you're more of an even kill than women are. But it's
Yeah.
fixable. It's very fixable.
Yeah, well, like we call it the menstrual cycle versus the
Yeah.
menstrual cycle, right? And it's like a 24-hour cycle versus a 28, 30-day cycle. So it's still relevant for men to know your hormones, but you're right, it's a very different pathway as far as like what to do about it. And by the way, too little as well as too much, they're both going to represent different problems, right? The hair, the skin, it's going to be impacted as much by not having enough as it is going to be impacted by having too much. So it's kind of a balancing act there. And I do think that modern day, there's so many endocrine disruptors and these different things that we've encountered, microplastics and toxic fragrances and body care products and these things that knowing the baseline pathway and then assuming that the world has gone ahead and complicated it even further. I think it matters more today than it would have in, let's say, the 50s or whatever, before we really got reliant on a lot of these things.
I think that also women nowadays will talk about it. Back way back when my mother was little, it was like, oh, we don't talk about those things. And so women didn't know, and so much education was just not there. Or, it wasn't as easily looked at or studied. So we've come a long way. And we are more in tune, women are more in tune with their bodies and like what's going on and how do I fix it. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that. The other thing that the DNA test told me is I'm estrogen dominant. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense why I like to gain weight around my waist. I mean, I like this little, and I struggle with it, but it was eye-opening. I was like, oh, okay. So that's my gene. I'm not happy with it, but I can deal with it. Now I know how to fix it. Now I know how to work around it instead of just being like, well, I guess this is it. Because it's for me, it's not it. It's not, I'm not living my life like, well, that's it. No. So I can
Yeah,
fix
well, it's what do you do with it, right? And let me say this as well about estrogen dominance because it's pretty common. And one thing to know about it is that the whole steroidogenesis pathway is exactly that. It's a pathway. So progesterone turns into testosterone, and then testosterone can either androgenize or aromatize, or a combo of both. So if you have an estrogen dominant profile, it means that you have dominance in the first place. So that means that the progesterone is converting to testosterone at a pretty rapid rate. It's just that later in the pathway, a lot of it is aromatizing and you are ending up with additional estrogen. One thing that I find to be pretty empowering is to remember that at least you're making more baseline sex hormones in the first place than some other people will, right? So when it comes to putting on muscle, you're actually going to have an easier time with estrogen dominance than you are with totally balanced profile. Like hormones are really strong. They kind of shout their signal at the body, like they don't whisper it. So if you've got a balanced profile, you're not getting a lot of testosterone off the progesterone. That means that it's more of a whisper than a shout. And it is going to be harder to put on that muscle mass. We just need to know how to make sure that we steer it a little bit towards androgens via weightlifting, compound lifts and, eating the right nutrition, all these different things. And that way you can steer it a little bit to maybe end up looking like yourself as well someday, right? Because you did have enough testosterone your whole life to build it. It's just that too much of it converted the other way,
Yeah.
right? So if you are estrogen dominant, don't despair. There is hope for you yet.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It was just really kind of eye-opening. But then I was like, okay, okay, it makes sense, right? You kind of know what to do with it. And um, the human body is an incredible machine. So anything that I could find out and learn and change, I think it's a win-win, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, as you kind of dissect your DNA report too, you'll know if your methylation cycle sucks, like you mentioned. That's going to have some downstream effects. You're going to know a lot about your micronutrient profile. if we're deficient in micronutrients, that's going to have an impact on your ability to put on muscle, on your ability to just have vitality in the first place, So I think that the body really works like a butterfly effect. I talked about this a little bit on my last webinar. Every system in the body affects the next one and then the next one. So we want to really take advantage of every little piece of info that we possibly can, including nutrition, So I think that's worth talking about tonight a little bit, like the way that you would use your DNA 360 and then kind of pair it with what you want for your physique, that thing that you picture in your head, you at your absolute best. I myself have an interesting profile because I'm right in the middle for everything. So I have like medium fat metabolism and then medium starch metabolism. So I end up with this weird hybrid approach where I'll either like carb backload or I'll carb cycle. What do you do, and what have you kind of seen with some of your female clients as far as like messing with the nutrition based on the DNA 360?
I think the biggest thing is walking them through it. A lot of women get set in our ways. So this is the way I've eaten. I've eaten this way for so long, and I don't want to give up my chips or my wine. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't have to give it up, but let's really look at it as a whole, and where can we change maybe just a little bit, not everything in moderation, but if maybe we can change a little bit, and then you're going to end up with better results because your DNA is built. This is the way you're built, So I do look at nutrition. That's another thing. That's one of after I go through the list of the sleep and this and that, what do you eat? What do you put in your mouth? How does it look for you? How does it make you feel when you're done? Are you satisfied, or are you unhappy? Do you snack at night? And are you do you fast? There's so many questions, and it goes with so many different ways to train that person based on how they eat. But it's it's very informative, and it's helped me so much. Again, like looking at the report and saying, okay, well, carbs are not their friend. So then I go back and I'm like, okay, do you struggle with carbs? What does a carb look like to you? Is it bread, or is it a sweet potato? Is it a donut, or do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I address it like that. And then once you kind of educate, always, people are like, oh, okay. And if you change just one little thing, the results are phenomenal. Just kind of like you talked about in weightlifting, you change one little thing. It's one little hack. That's not really like, you haven't put them on this huge, oh, you can't ever eat again diet. And they're like, wow, it worked and I feel good. Or my bloat's gone. You change one thing and the bloat or the gas. And so that's how I look at it. And it's not rocket science, but it works, right? Because it's all so important. And you feel your body, and your body responds.
Yeah, let me just say one interesting thing that I've discovered within the DNA 360 report. So we do look at satiety signaling, right? Like we look at a gene called FTO. That's a signal that your gut sends to your brain to say like, okay, we've had enough calories, like stop eating now. For some people, that can be dysregulated, right? So it's a bit of a slower signal for some people than others, such that once the signal hits your brain, you've already gone back and had that extra helping, right? That extra serving. So that's the first one. And then we also have another one called MC4R. It's the same idea, but it's the level of the palate now. So in your mouth, it's the same thing. Your mouth sends a signal to your brain, and you can be dysregulated for those as well. If you've heard that before on one of these webinars, let me just give you an interesting nuance. When I have a client, I will pair that profile with their dopamine profile, which is in a whole nother section. It's in your mood and behavior profile, because if you have any level of binging tendencies with your dopamine profile or addictive tendencies with your dopamine profile, and you're dysregulated for those satiety signals, most likely that's going to be your vice or one of your vices, right? So it's interesting. And I wanted to highlight that because we talk about them kind of separately in the reports. Here's the dopamine profile. It can lend itself to binging or addictive behavior if you're a high binder and you have quick clearance or really, too long clearance. But if you're also dysregulated for that FTO or that MC4R, know that you're pretty well genetically set up to be the type of person who's going to binge specific with food. Food is going to be one of those bigger triggers. So once we know that, okay, we can set certain things in place to maybe curb the appetite. Like we'll use Garcinia cambogia is like an appetite suppressant herb from ancient Chinese medicine. I'll use ketone esters. We'll use like gratitude practices and things surrounding your meals, whatever the strategy is. But I like to pair those two profiles to know if you're an overeater in the first place. So that's just one thing I wanted to highlight on that one. It's
That's
fun to
awesome.
do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great info. That's really good info.
Yeah, because we need to know what you're going to binge on, right? So it's a little clue as to maybe you're going to be that type of person. Um, Another really important one that I always look at, because we have a few genes associated with macronutrients, right? And how you would kind of lay them out. Um, I recommend not just looking at the ApoA2, which is about lipid metabolism. And then there's one called AMY1, which is about starch metabolism. I try not to look at those sovereignly on their own without first looking at one called TCF7L2, which is all about insulin response, right? So if you look at that first and you know if you're dysregulated there or not, it's going to influence those other two genes, right? So you may have a totally optimal AMY1, which means that based on that gene, you're going to be able to metabolize quite a bit of starches. But if you're already suboptimal for TCF7L2, we need to alter the strategy, because yes, you have a baseline ability to metabolize starches, but it is going to trigger that insulin mechanism and you may still end up gaining weight, bad weight. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of weird little connective tissue between the systems that I like to kind of pick apart when I have a patient, because if we take gene as an n=1 basis, you're probably still not going to get the best kind of baseline results. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But it's good information, right? Because it leads you down the path of fixing it or how to deal with it. So I've always said, even if you have bad genes, it's good that you still look at them and go, okay, what can I do to them? Because they're still superpower and how you can handle it, right? So it can't be a negative thing like, oh, my genes are bad, or I no. Now that we know, how do we work around it and make it work, to our benefit? So we can't change our genes, but we can change what we put in our body and how it affects our genes, right? So I love that part of it.
Yeah, and we know where to place the intervention is the most important thing. Like earlier, I mentioned that I do boxing and it's out of concordance with my genes as far as how much cardio I should do. But I like to zoom out on these things because I actually have a really good 9p21 gene. So I have what's called the 0G, which means that it's pretty much top 10% of the population as far as the toughness of my blood vessels. So I can handle a lot of cardio actually at the level of the cardiovascular system, but the mitochondrial detox is where the issue is, right? So if my profile suggests don't do a lot of cardio, it's doing it because of the mitochondrial side of things. Once we know what we're talking about, oh, my heart is actually going to be okay for me doing this, but my mitochondria are not. So that's why I added in the hydrogen, water, and the things specific to the mitochondria. Once again, we zoom out, the whole profile matters. Everything affects everything else. That's why I recommend having some level of coaching program if you haven't yet, because that way we're going to be able to get really, really detailed, right? And know, well, the report said this because the algorithm said this. It's pretty well put together, these reports, but coaching and nuance matters a lot in these conversations. So I'm really trying to highlight that, because getting some level of interpretation is going to make it so that we can really get you the most out of your reports. We know your genes, they're not going to change, but we need to know what to express and what to downregulate. So that's where the coaching kind of comes in.
1000%. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Perfect.
Yeah. So, I mean, we customize everything, right? We customize the way you train. We customize the way that you would do your nutrition. You mentioned tailoring things to women's cycles. I think that's something you can do with nutrition as well. Are you familiar, Felicia, with Dr. Mindy Pelz and Fast Like a Girl, that whole thing?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have. Yeah, I actually have listened to some of her stuff. She's very, very smart. She thrives on that fasting.
Yeah. I learned a lot when I started listening to her because it was like, we talk about the genes, right? But it's like tonight's conversation, we're trying to tailor it towards women specifically. And I
Mhm.
do recommend checking out that book, Fast Like a Girl, if you haven't already, because it does go into some pretty good detail about when to eat more carbs based on the cycle, when to do yoga as opposed to heavier weight training, and the different phases of the cycle as well. So that's a really good resource that I recommend. And when you started talking about the different phases, I was just curious if that's where you got it from.
That's exactly where I got it because she's super smart about this stuff. And I have that book. It's a great read for
Yeah.
women who are curious and want to know more about fasting and how their hormones work. Yeah, she's very smart. Very smart, good book. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's one of those things we talk about personalizing. It's always the name of the game. Um, we talk a lot about intolerances as well in the nutrition report, and the way I like to kind of look at that is that if you eat a food that your body doesn't agree with, I consider it to be a stressor on the body, right? Like it's a stress. Your body goes, oh, that's poison, right? So it'll kind of increase cortisol signaling and things as well because it just doesn't recognize what to do with that. So that's again where some of your reports can be very useful. We look at things like lactose intolerance, right? And we look at things like gluten intolerance. If you're somebody who's struggling to get results, these little micro things can be really valuable because if there's some level of microinflammation being caused at the level of the gut because you took in something that you didn't necessarily know how to metabolize, it's an interesting thing because it has nothing to do with the calorie content.
Right.
It's inflammation. It's your body is inflamed and it's going to cause more water storage and things along those lines. Um, it's funny, people who have, let's say, a continuous glucose monitor, they can take in something that's totally neutral from a macronutrient perspective. Like they could take in a small handful of macadamia nuts or something like that and be like, well, there's pretty much zero carbs in there. And I'm aligned with my ability to metabolize the little bit of fats that are in there. Why did it cause a blood sugar increase? And it's because of the cortisol. Your body interpreted it like it was poison. So your liver released cortisol to say, something bad just came into our body. And even though the calories and the macros didn't cause that, the poison aspect did. Right. So it's a really good idea to know what forms of food are considered stressful to your body as well. Have you experienced that, like just eating foods and having it bloat you or, cause
Oh,
issues?
oh, 1000%. Once you get so in tune with what you eat and how you feel, everything I put in my mouth, I know what's going to happen. And some things grapes. I love green grapes, but when I eat them, I bloat immediately. It's just something my body, I don't know what it is in the grape. You might know. I don't know what it is. That literally my body just bloats. I don't feel bad, but I bloat. Definitely don't eat them if I'm going to a photo shoot or I'm going to go to the pool because that's the last thing I wanted to look. But yes, absolutely. Food. I I tell people, that's another thing. It's what you stick in your mouth, right? And I tell all my clients, shop on the outside. I've said this before.
Yeah.
Shop on the outside. Don't shop on the inside. If it has an expiration date on it, I don't consider it food. I mean, if you have an apple and it's in the refrigerator and it turns brown, then you know it's not any good. But food, if I have to have an expiration date on it and I have to look at it, do I really at the end of the day want to put it in my body? Because how's my body going to react to it? You're exactly right. How's it going to break it down? Is it going to be like toxic and is my liver going to have to work over? And so I'm very aware, and I try to teach all my clients, look, you need to be very aware of how you're shopping and what you're eating. And after you eat it, how do you feel? How did it all the way to the next day? How was your bowel movement? Did you have one? I mean, and I know people don't want to talk about that stuff, but we need to. It's very healthy, right? It's a very healthy thing. So absolutely. I agree 1000% that you need to watch what you put in your body. And it's very interesting that you could eat a couple of nuts and have a totally different reaction or numbers if you're on a, if you're taking some kind of insulin.
Yeah, I'm curious. Did those grapes that you ate, did they have seeds or were they seedless grapes?
Seedless.
Okay. I was gonna say it's possible that the seeds, just because there is a couple of those kind of defense chemicals within the seeds.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that whole paradigm is interesting, and some people actually do react to different defense chemicals found in these foods, like oxalates and
Yeah.
phytic acid, lectins, etc. So I was just curious if it was that, but could be a general food sensitivity as well. That's always possible.
It's just weird. It's just one of those things. You're like, huh, why does that happen? And I think it happens with everybody. Is there anything that you eat that you're like, okay, I can't eat that because it makes me feel weird or it bloats me? Or do you as a man struggle with anything like
Yeah, but it's what's really funny is for me the inflammation doesn't show up as like body bloat. It actually shows up as acne. I get like
that?
if I have like a big old cheat meal or something, which is really friggin' rare, I pay for it with my skin.
Oh,
That's like it'll just like all of a sudden they'll start popping up, and it's like that's a real good sign of some level of gut inflammation going on there as well. And I will say that I've improved my capacity to dabble by really focusing on microbiome health as well. I've used peptides and various things and fasting strategies and what have you to improve my general microbiome health at the level of the gut. And I think you have a little bit more leniency if you do really focus on that for a while. Um, Anybody who has any level of leaky gut is going to experience those on a more severe level because you're also letting nutrients kind of pass through the membrane, and bad things are going to happen as a downstream effect. Um, so yeah, I recommend focusing on your microbiome too if you're really reactive to a lot of different foods. In general, though, genetically speaking, I do have a lactose intolerance. So one thing that I recommend to clients is that there's this conversation about dairy, and lactose and dairy are not necessarily the same conversation, right? Because you can not react to the lactose, but you can react to the casein
yeah.
or the dairy fats, right? I mean, there's just a few different things. There's A1 versus A2 dairy. So a lot of women that I know, they react, they break out or whatever to dairy, but they don't know what part of the dairy caused that. If it was a factory farmed cow and it was fed estrogens and these things, and you're already estrogen dominant, yeah, you're probably going to end up increasing your estrogen that much further, and it's going to impact your body. It's going to cause more inflammation. So, once again, having some kind of metric to look at, that's how we tailor your diet. Maybe you can handle some A2, some goat cheese or some lactose-free Greek yogurt or something like that. But we've got to know first, like, what the intolerance actually looks like. So that's the level of personalization that we get to with this.
Totally agree. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. By the way, you can use a lactase enzyme if you need to, and it can actually help to counteract those issues. And I like to have little hacks in place. Like, for example, if you have genetically a suboptimal gluten profile, which there's a family of genes called HLA, and that's in our report, and it'll show you if you have pretty decent response to gluten, or there's kind of a medium profile where you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or you can be full on celiac, which means there's really no hack for it. You just need to not include it anymore. Uh, I'm kind of in the middle. So if you do have a slight propensity for gluten sensitivity, you can also use things like dipeptidyl peptidase. And please don't anyone ask me to spell that.
It's
Uh,
like, what? Say it again. Peptable.
Dipeptidyl peptidase. It's actually just called gluten guardian. There's products that have that, but that's the enzyme that metabolizes gluten, right? So it's one of those little hacks. You could have it on hand, and you can tailor your nutrition once again to your DNA by having a little hack, something that you can just have in the cabinet for when you go to the restaurant or when you go to the family get together and yeah, I'm probably going to have a little bit of bull crap tonight. These are the ones that you have on hand to counteract that downside, so to speak.
Huh. Kind of like a Tums. Is that what you're saying? Is it kind of like that? I mean, is it like
Definitely
what
not a
you were
Tums.
saying? I don't. Okay. All right. I need to look that one up. That's new on me. I don't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Gluten Guardian, it's a great one to have on hand. When it comes to supplements, I have like different categories. So I have these are my non-negotiables daily. My genes don't do this job, but I need something to do that job. And so year round, I'm on certain supplements. Then I have a second category of supplements that I kind of cycle onto and off of. Um, and then I have kind of just the occasions, the fun ones that I want to have on hand, like a dipeptidyl peptidase or, nootropics or something that I'll take prior to a webinar or whatever. So I put my supplements in these different categories, and it's a way of personalizing it further so that it's not baffling. You don't have to just be on each and every one of these supplements each and every time, but there's ones to have in the cabinet for kind of if and when. Um, do you have stuff like that? And with your patients, do you do like different ones to always be on and then ones to maybe cycle on and off of?
I'm a big creatine girl. I believe in creatine. I am on it all the time. I put my clients on it, my women. I have good results with it. But that was going to bring that up with the DNA report. It shows you how vitamin D big. We all, do we need it? Do we not? If you listen to like the news, oh, every single person needs vitamin D. We all, we don't get enough this, we don't get enough that. Well, I was taking it for years because, right, I just thought, well, when I got my DNA report, it said that I do have good vitamin D, but I do sit in the sun, I do get the extra, but I don't need the extra supplement. So I thought that was really interesting. Another thing that it told me was vitamin A with retinol. Had no idea. So the DNA was like, it really kind of made it simple. It's like, okay, this is what I do need, this is what I not. And that goes right along with workouts, right? The supplements, the workout, the food, the nutrition, they all go together. So what is it that I need? I found out that the vitamin A, and I don't know if I've told you before, it helped with my dry eye.
Interesting.
And I didn't know that that was a thing. It said, my DNA report did not say take vitamin A because of dry eye. But when I started taking it, I noticed that I quit having dry eye. So I was like, okay, what am I doing? Because I'm always like, what have I changed? What have I done? And I looked up vitamin A with retinol because that's what I was supposed to take. And it says helps with dry eye. And I was like, genius. I was so relieved. I mean, it was just little things that I'm like, oh my laundry. I'm fixed, right? So I didn't know I need vitamin D. I didn't know I did need the vitamin A, but along with that, it also gave me the other things that I did need and what need to take. But yeah, back to my clients, I always try to put them on a good multivitamin. I always try to, see, I talk with my women. Do you have bad bones? Is it in your history? If they haven't taken the DNA test, try to get as much information as I can to know what to put them on. On the flip side of that, I know there's so many products out there that are just a waste of money. And I've even asked you before good products because it's so important. I don't want you spending $50 on stuff that you're just gonna pee it out. I mean, that's probably the most frustrating part about supplements. And I know we need them all, but finding a really good one, they're priceless and then they work. And I totally believe in them because they got me when I was competing to the next level. And there's no way I could have without the supplements I was taking, the L-glutamine, the L-carnitine, the creatine, that, all those things along with multivitamins and things like vitamin C, things like that. But your DNA report will tell you, right? So it can very much be tailored. So, and
Yeah, yeah, and creatine is definitely one of the recommended supplements for anybody who's going to embark in weightlifting. It's probably the oldest and most studied supplement. I'll tell anybody on this call who's using creatine or yourself, Felicia, I've recently discovered something very interesting. There is a new product out, and it's called GAA. It's an acronym for an even worse word than dipeptidyl peptidase, so I don't even think I can pronounce it. But GAA is actually a precursor to creatine that absorbs via 8 different pathways as opposed to just one. So if you've been on creatine for a while and you want to take it to the next level, GAA that's actually going to be the next stage of creatine. It's a new, stage in its evolution. So I recommend checking that out. And for women, it's great because you're not going to get a ton of bloat. Like some women do get a little bit concerned about some of the water retention that you can get from a typical monohydrate creatine. The GAA will give you those strength benefits, the performance benefits, but it absorbs so well that it doesn't cause as much notable water retention. So you'll be able to put on a little bit more lean muscle mass if you use something like GAA and not be bloated. So that's a really cool one for women, especially men as well. But we don't struggle as much with the bloat typically as women do, of course. So that's another little added suggestion that I would make.
I love that. Do you have a brand that you've always got a brand? Do you have a brand that you?
Brand. Yeah, there's the only one that I've seen truly patent it so far, and we're not affiliated or anything, but it is a great company that I've used for a number of things. It's called Level Up Health, and they spell it weird. It's like LVLUP Health. This Australian naturopath is the guy who created it, and he's a really knowledgeable guy. He's been on Ben Greenfield's podcast. Kyle Van Durst or something is his name. But either way, a lot of great research goes into stuff like those products. And it's one of the ones that I actually noticed when I started taking. I was like, man, I'm stronger today than I was yesterday, and that's a really cool feeling.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if our CEO, Tracy, is on tonight and she has any offers to offer us. Tracy, are you available for a second?
Yeah, hey, you guys, I'm here. How are you? You guys are doing great tonight. A lot of good information. This is kind of fun.
Thank you. It is fun.
It's important to know Felicia actually designed my fitness program. And after looking at my genetics, we found out everything I had been doing for years did not do anything to help me. And so Felicia said, we're going to change some of this shit. And she did. And made me some customized stuff. And girl, it's been awesome. And I feel amazing. Lots of energy, building muscle, feeling good. Just really game changer. So thanks for that.
You're very welcome. I love working with you. You've had incredible, incredible changes and you're just getting stronger and more and fit every day. Love it.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a couple of things, right? We've got a lot of people that are asking about DNA 360. For anyone that knows anything about their not just their genetics but their epigenetics, DNA 360 gives you that blueprint, right? But the epigenetic report, the DNA aging report, tells us the difference between your chronological age and your effective age. And your effective age is really how your body's expressing, right? And it's all nutritionally driven. Those markers are nutritionally driven. So if you're, 42, but your body might be aging at more than 1 year per calendar year, and we see a lot of that in this business. And as we get older, when we turn 50 and our body thinks we're 55, now we've lost 10% of our time span, right? So we created a longevity bundle, and in fact, I wasn't going to discount this until Black Friday, but I think one of my team in the background, Katie, drop in the longevity bundle and give them $115 off. So make sure that link factors that. So the longevity bundles, like it's almost $900. We're going to take $115 off. It gives you both of the tests. So it gives you your foundational test, right? Tells you your genes, tells you how they express, covers all the systems in the body, right? Mood and behavior, longevity, hormones, diet and exercise, all of those things. And then the DNA aging test, that'll tell you how old you are and how fast you're aging. And when you get both of those, I'll even give you guys a consultation with one of our FGPs to go through those two tests when the results come in, and then help you figure out how you can slow that clock. I mean, we've got some people that were aging at 1.5 to 1 3/4 years per calendar year. And we've actually had where we've reversed 5, 7, 10 years off of some of our clientele. So it can be done, but you have to know where you're starting. You have to know where where your numbers are, what your focus needs to be. And like I said at the beginning, I was doing all this cardio, not 1 ounce of it did me any good. And had Felicia not have looked at all of that, nothing would have changed for me. So I'll do that for tonight. And again, for this audience, I'm not going to roll it out otherwise on the main site until Black Friday.
Well, thank you, Tracy. That's amazing.
You're welcome. And you guys, you got a bunch of questions in here, so why don't you guys hop into the Q&A box? Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start tackling some of these questions because we've got a few burning ones in here. So Nick V asks, if you have high cortisol and inflammation, what exercise is good for not triggering more cortisol? No results from DNA 360 yet. Okay, fair enough. I like that you said yet. So, cortisol and inflammation, what I would say as far as exercise is concerned, we need to be aware that exercise is considered a hormetic stress, right? So it is stress, but it's kind of a positive stress. It's something that we actually consider to have favorable adaptations as far as exposing your body to it. We need to consider what kind of exercise is going to trigger sympathetic activity in the body, more cortisol heavy, or parasympathetic activity in the body, right? So something like yoga is going to be a parasympathetic exercise and is probably going to have a cortisol lowering effect and an inflammation lowering effect. A HIIT workout, on the other hand, is likely going to increase cortisol levels. However, I would recommend, and we'll know a lot more once you have your DNA 360, I would recommend isolating where the inflammation is coming from, because it's not a good recommendation to not engage in difficult exercises because the overall inflammation in your body is too high, right? We need to find out why that unnatural inflammation is coming so that we can introduce the hormetic stressors to get the bone density benefits and the hormone benefits, the circulation benefits, the cognitive benefits, all these things that we get from doing these harder exercises, right? Weightlifting and, whatever your genes suggest. But, you could have a methylation problem. You could have a detox problem. There's a lot of things that could be going on to increase the totality of your inflammation and your cortisol. I would want to tackle those and then just find out what we can do from an exercise perspective. I never really recommend don't move your body, right? I think that that's always going to be among my recommendations. We may just have to tailor it a little bit for you. But in general, those would be the exercises that kind of equate to that. Felicia, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, it doesn't have anything to do with exercise, because I agree with everything you said. Cortisol is stress. And sometimes I think breath work is when if you just get to a place where you can just kind of breathe and just kind of relax just for a little bit on the other side after you've worked out and after the exercises. I just think breath work is really, really, maybe a meditation, maybe just finding a quiet place just for a few minutes. That's what I would recommend on top of that. Or stretching. Stretching also is, there we go, moving again. Stretching, yoga, anything that can get you more relaxed and a more stable, not stable, but you know what I'm trying to say, just more relaxed state.
Yeah, homeostasis. That's what I always
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I hope that helped, Nick. And looking forward to meeting you once you get your DNA 360 done.
Yes.
All right. Second question from Margaret H. Hello, Margaret. I hear the new research says that postmenopausal women, wait, the thing just moved on me, must lift heavy in quotes. But if you have some arthritis or, hand wrist problems despite BHRT, what are some solutions to get stronger? Okay, interesting. So the term lift heavy is really in reference to the rep range that you choose, right? So the 1 to 5 repetition range is considered lifting heavy, but that's going to look really different for each person as far as the actual poundage is used. I would say that what the goal would namely be is to challenge your body within that 1 to 5 repetition range with whatever you can do to not aggravate the issue. Really, once again, to maybe isolate where the arthritis is coming from. Is there some sort of autoimmune issue, which we can look at your gut detox. Again, methylation. Is there vitamin D problems so your body doesn't deal with inflammation as well? There's so many things within the DNA that we could look at and kind of point to. But what I would recommend is as many anti-inflammatory and immune boosting properties as possible, and then move your body in whatever way you're currently able to, right? It's about what we can do, and we try not to talk so much about what we can't do, but that's more in relation to the repetition range. Felicia, do you have any additional things that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I was going to say is when they say lift heavy, I think they mean not go out and, get some PRs done, but go out and move enough where you feel it, but it's not overbearing. So I agree with Justin. Yes, move weights. It doesn't have to be this exuberant amount of pounds. It's just moving enough where you feel it. I know that sometimes they say, oh, well, women get in there and lift 5 pounds and they're doing 5 pounds for 40 reps. I think they're just saying do heavy enough weight where you feel it, but not to the point where you're struggling or it hurts. It hurts the arthritis part in you. That's what I say.
Yeah, and it's okay to start with body weight stuff too. I mean, calisthenics are magical,
Yes, for sure. Body weights are phenomenal.
Yeah. So, I mean, start where it starts, and then hopefully you're able to kind of gradually increase. And, if you ever do get into a coaching program, maybe we can figure out where the heck the arthritis is coming from in the first place. And that would be a great thing if we could go ahead and help fix that for you. So I hope that helped you, Margaret. Okay, so Janice asked, that's my mother's name. Hello, Janice. Most people are either androgen dominant or estrogen dominant. What about someone who is both? Okay, so this is interesting, right? Like I mentioned earlier in the call, this is such a pathway. This is a textbook example of a cellular cascade. One step to the next step to the next step. So if you have a good mix of both, if you're what we call co-dominant, that means that, yeah, you're making a lot of testosterone off of your progesterone. Some of it is androgenizing via the SRD2 pathway, and you're getting some androgens. And then later in the pathway, some of it is aromatizing via the CYP family of genes, and you're getting a bit of a blend of both. What I would say is that there's going to be some advantages to that when it comes to athletic performance, because you're going to get a little bit of both of these things, which can help with weight training and putting muscle on, etc. What I would say is we want to kind of amplify one over the other via keeping your body fat down, for example, because more body fat will aromatize even more, and you might end up with some additional, estrogen-related inflammation. Too much androgen dominance isn't good either for a woman, because that can lead to things like PCOS, balding, cystic acne, body hair. I mean, we don't want too many androgens either. So you can use things like green tea extract, quercetin. Like there's things that actually counteract androgen toxicity as well that you may want to look at. And then look later in the pathway as well to what the estrogen is going to convert into. Too much 16 alpha or 4-hydroxyestrogen, we're going to want to counteract that as well via things like DIM, sulforaphane, I3C, those kind of substrates. So know what the danger points are. But what I would say is living a more androgenized lifestyle is going to help to make it so that your body has more muscle mass and a little bit less body fat. And that would be simply, compound weightlifting, appropriate amounts of cardiovascular exercise based on the rest of your profile. Anything to add to that one, Felicia?
No, that was awesome. Perfect.
So I hope that one helps. Okay. So Stacy's got a question for us. In the supplementation recommendations, so she's referring to the DNA 360, hers says male hormone A support, female hormone A support. And she's asking, is this suggesting both, or is this saying that males and hormones would use? Okay, so she's asking which one to use. So yeah, that's because there's an algorithm involved here, right? And the reports, like I mentioned, are very well made, but they can only pick up on X amount of things, X amount of factors. So that product is going to be there to help counteract androgen toxicity, just like I mentioned, but the ingredient list is a little bit different for males as it is for females. So for you, honestly, I would just use the female A support. That one should, interact nicely with your physiology. And in that way, you can go ahead and not have to buy two separate products that have the same goal. I recognize that Stacy could be a male or a female name, so I apologize if you're a male. Use whichever one is correct for who you are, basically is what I'm trying to say. Let's see. So we've got another one. Do you recommend hormone metabolism / biomarker testing, or is that included in the genetic SNPs that suggest a predisposition, but don't necessarily tell what is happening? Interesting question. So yes, I do recommend looking at biomarkers. The way I describe this is that genes are really, really upstream, right? So genes encode enzymes, and then enzymes tell your cells how to function. Enzymes do everything in the body. They tell your body to think, they tell your body to blink, and your genes encode them. So the biomarkers would represent what that downstream manifestation looks like, right? So let's say you have suboptimal antioxidation in your genes. Well, you would look at markers to see what the free radical buildup would actually look like in your bloodstream or in your urine, right? So I do recommend having those kinds of tests done. There's great companies out there, like, for example, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, Genova Diagnostics. There's a lot of great companies, True Diagnostics, different companies that measure the biomarkers. But remember, the genes represent the factory setting. They're going to tell your cells how to behave. And if they're suboptimal, it's going to lead as a downstream effect to elevated markers. So pairing the two is a really good strategy. And likely there's going to be a pretty high correlation between the two. What do you think about that one, Felicia?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, you're killing it. You're killing it, Justin.
I get so selfish with these questions. I try to always
You,
answer
you
them
do
all.
so well, and you're killing it. Just keep going. Next
All right,
question.
let's keep going. Okay, so Mary has a question. Do the fluctuations in energy levels through the menstrual cycle persist post-menopause? Does the pituitary continue the cycle? I am asking because I feel like I do continue to have cyclical fluctuations. I'm going to toss this one to you first, and then I'll give my 2 cents on it as well. Do you have any input on that?
Oh,
Tough, right? Because there's so many things that
yeah,
happen post-menopause.
yeah, and every woman is different in how her hormone levels end up. You know, I don't have the correct answer for this, and I'm going to be honest. I think it does continue to cycle, but I don't. And correct me if I'm wrong, or you give me your advice. I don't think it continues to cycle because your body's at a different place. But I may be wrong, Justin. I have to answer this one too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so this is one of those ones where it's important to know that post-menopause, the actual progesterone slows down by quite a ways. So I would say that it's still going to be present, but it's not going to be nearly as pronounced as it is pre-menopause, which pre-menopause is your whole life up until you get into that peri and during menopause. So the actual progesterone, when it slows down, all of the downstream effects are going to slow down a bit as well, right? So we talk about these dominant profiles. Progesterone to testosterone is the first phase of that. So once you hit that particular phase of life, progesterone is going to slow down, and therefore there's not as much of it there to go ahead and convert to testosterone, and then convert to more androgens, and then convert to more estrogens, and all of their associated byproducts. So it's likely that you're not going to experience as much of a fluctuation because you're not cycling anymore, right? You no longer have a menstrual cycle. So you're not going to experience the extremes of all these different phases, and it elevates and then it drops, and the mood and the cravings and all these different things are kind of happening alongside this cycle. As the cycle slows down, I would say, in my opinion, yeah, you're going to experience a drop in those kinds of things. But you're coming off a whole lifetime of experiencing them. So there may even be a psychosomatic component to that where you're used to having these different fluctuations. Energy fluctuations as well. There's so many things that can be going on aside from hormones, right? This can also have detox components. This can have neurotransmitter components, right? Like let's say your body doesn't break down protein well enough because you don't have enough proteolytic enzymes present. Well, proteins convert to amino acids, and amino acids convert to neurotransmitters. It builds them. So you could have a deficiency there, and a deficiency there would likely lend itself to midday slump, or some days you have energy and some days you don't, and brain fog. So I think it's a bit of a broader question, but that's one of those ones that if you do experience any problems, I'd recommend a coaching program so we can zoom out, look at methylation, look at antioxidation, etc. So I hope that answered that decently for you, Mary, because it's a difficult question. It is. It's there's a lot going on post menopause. All right, so Stacy's back, round two. So she's asking, why put every woman on creatine? Please explain. Is there a genetic profile who will not do well with creatine? So I'm sure we both have an opinion on this one. Felicia, I'll start. Creatine generally starts to kind of drop in its production later on in life. Like we have harder time getting our creatine levels up. And creatine, what it really does is it repairs the ATP molecule, right? So ATP represents that chemical currency that our cells use and our brain uses and our organs use. So when we move, our body breaks ATP triphosphate down into ADP diphosphate. It breaks it down. Creatine phosphate repairs the ATP molecule. So it goes from di back up to tri, which means that now your cells can use it again. So it's really valuable for your brain function, for general energy within the mitochondria. Creatine plays a really big role there. So males and females, in my opinion, can both benefit from creatine. The only people that I say maybe don't use creatine would be people that are on like a carnivorous diet, people who have so much creatine in their diet that there's just no real reason to go ahead and supplement with it. Other than that, I think pretty much everyone, men and women both, can use creatine and likely should. And Felicia, I mean, you've used it for so long. What are the main benefits that you see from it?
Well, to me, it enhances performance and exercise. And also I see mood and behavior. It helps with mood and behavior. I also see that it helps in bone density. There's a lot of research coming out for women about creatine now, and it's all positive stuff. So anything that I can recommend that promotes women's health, that's why I'm all for it. I've taken it. I see results. We were even talking about earlier about the GAA. I'm really interested in it. So that's why I put all my women on it.
Yeah, and it's the first time I took creatine, I notably got bigger and stronger. After I did that loading phase, I was like, man, I'm like a big guy now. Like this is excellent. And I was probably 18 or something the first time I took it, so a lifetime ago. But yeah, that was awesome. So it's a good one to try. And if you take it and you don't experience a lot of benefit from it, you may, I mean, if you have a lot of red meat in your diet, like I say, you're not going to notice it as much as someone who's eating a lot of chicken as their primary protein source. It's not as heavy in creatine as red meat. So typically people who are already eating a lot of red meat aren't going to notice it as much. And honestly, if you don't want to add to your supplement stack and you have the ability to process red meat, that's one of those ones that you can get from your diet. It's just you've got to eat a decent amount of it to get proper levels. So hopefully that helps. There's a heck of a lot of questions about creatine here, actually. So it's a good topic tonight. Let's see here. Where are we at? Hi, Patricia. She asked a similar question about creatine supplementation. Patricia is one of my patients, so shout out to you. And yeah, there's no real specific part that is going to, like in the DNA 360, that's going to talk about creatine. But what I will say is that creatine supports your brain function a lot. And if you do have suboptimal BDNF in your brain, you know, your mood and behavior profile, it's going to lend itself to some brain fog and things, and creatine can actually help. It doesn't increase BDNF, but general support for the brain by increasing ATP storage is of use. But yeah, there's no particular part in the DNA 360 that talks about creatine.
Yeah, that was the part that I was talking about, the mood and
Yeah.
behavior.
It's almost a nootropic, honestly. Like it's good for your brain, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question. Is there an MVI, I'm guessing that means multivitamin, for women that you recommend as a baseline before testing? Do you have a go-to, Felicia?
No, we talked about this earlier about the multivitamins, that there's so many out there. I think you just got to be picky on what you get. Make sure that it's very, it's tested and it's worthy and it meets all the standards. There's not one that I truly recommend. No, it's funny. I used to take vitamins and put them like in apple cider vinegar, and I would
Right.
see if they would dissolve. And I would kind of do this home test before I actually took them, because so many you just bypass them. And so I would put them in cider to see if they dissolve, and that's how I would know, like, okay, I'm going to get something out of them. So sometimes I would do a lot of my own testing, but that's just a little talk about a weird hack. But no, I'm sure you do. You are the king of like name brands, and I it's phenomenal. So what do you suggest?
Well, so my hesitance with recommending multivitamins is that we need to be aware of your methylation pathway with it, especially with B vitamins, because a lot of these complexes, they've all got these pre-methylated forms of B vitamins in there. And some people, based on the methylation pathway, don't do well with pre-methylated B vitamins. Some people do, but if you can't use the extra methyl groups, they can actually overload the cytoplasm pretty easily, and you can end up over methylating, which can cause a host of problems. So I never recommend a full-on multivitamin to anyone without seeing their DNA because of that. I don't want to cause inflammation at the level of the cell because we've overloaded the cytoplasm. What I do use and what I do recommend generally as an alternative is I'm a big fan of just using these different superfood complexes. Honestly, like I pretty much add superfoods to every meal that I have. And it might be organ capsules, it might be spirulina and chlorella, it might be a mushroom complex, it might be a mineral complex like our friends at Beam, right? They use like the fulvic and the humic acid. It might be bee pollen, it might be shilajit. There's so many cool little things that are really, really dense with micronutrients, but nature went ahead and balanced it out decently, right? Like, so for example, I use this beef organ complex that has like kidney and pancreas and heart and all these different things in there. Nature actually figured out how to balance the zinc with the copper, and cofactors and all these things are present within what nature already provided. And you have a much better bet doing that as opposed to going for synthetic multivitamins, where A, there could be toxic ingredients that they added in, B, there could be too many methyl groups, C, you could be over supplementing with one and under supplementing with another. So stick with nature until you have your DNA 360, and then you can go ahead and personalize. We also have something called Black Label that we're launching currently for everybody, and that's awesome because that allows you to work with a practitioner and have us go through and select the ingredients as well as the dosages based on body weight and gender and genetics. So I recommend the DNA company, frankly, when it comes to that. But beyond that, yeah, just use different superfoods and then know how your methylation cascade goes and how your genes are kind of lined up. Okay, so I hope that one helped. Karen has a question. Why would creatine supplements cause extreme acne? Is there anything to stop the negative effects besides supplementing creatine? You said creatinine, but I'm assuming you meant creatine because those are two separate things. So there's no really proven clinical correlation between creatine and acne. However, I have heard the anecdote before. Too high a dose for your body can actually aromatize a bit. So that's an important one to say for today's conversation. Or there's such a thing as dirty creatine. That GAA would actually be a really interesting one to try, because I don't think that you're going to get the extra inflammation that you may be getting from some of these dirtier creatines. Creatine monohydrate is the most studied. There's also creatine HCl. There's creatine nitrate. There's a lot of different types, and usually this is one of those mass manufactured supplements. It's pretty easy to get, and usually it'll be cut with a whole bunch of different things. And if you get just some of these generic off brands, right? So I would be aware of that. Be aware of where you get it, the sourcing, and then also be aware of the type and the dosage. If you're taking 10 grams a day and you're a 120-pound female, you've probably overdone it a bit. I don't even take 10 grams a day as a 200-pound male, right? So be aware of the dosing. Do you have anything to add to that, Felicia?
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I take the monohydrate is what I take. And I would make sure that it's not dirty, like you talked about. Yeah, I agree. I've actually never run into anybody that causes extreme acne. So that's really interesting to me. Yeah, it makes me wonder what brand or what kind that is she's taking.
Yeah, or what dose?
Or what dose. And it may exactly what you said be on the dose. Yeah. Maybe back off of it a little bit. Maybe back off a little bit and see how your skin reacts.
Yeah, and there's also so if you use an HCl creatine, one of the good things about it is that you don't have to do the loading phase with HCl, right? So with monohydrate, there's a loading phase. You got to take a certain amount for the first week, and then you drop down to a maintenance phase. And some people will load it in there with up to like 20 grams. Like they're taking like 4 scoops a day for a week. It's quite a dose, right? Like that's quite a bit. And then you have to cycle it. You have to come off of it every 8 weeks or so and then go back on, which means you have to do the loading phase over again. So HCl is nice because it's 3 grams as opposed to 5. You would typically take 1.5 grams twice a day so that you're not overloading it. And then you don't get nearly as much water retention with HCl either if you are prone to that. And then also you don't have to come off it if you don't want to. You don't have to cycle or load it. So maybe try an HCl and see if that works for you. If not, check out that GAA that I talked about, because that can be really useful as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm checking that out. I'm doing that.
Yeah, you'll enjoy that one. Okay, so I mean, we're coming to the end of the hour here, hour and a half that we've done. Felicia, this is a pleasure as always. I love that we're integrating fitness into the DNA, because it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about being awesome and doing awesome and being strong and looking good and feeling good. Confidence is something that you build. It's something that you have to put effort into. You need evidence as to why you should be a confident person. Be a man or a woman, you still need to do something to make yourself feel good every day. And fitness is one of those baseline tools. And with DNA, we can really get personal about it. So I'm so excited to have you on the team, Felicia.
Well, thank you. I love doing these with you. It's so fun. I learned so much too. Just bouncing ideas and bouncing things and answering questions. It's so much fun. I agree with you 100%. It's all about building confidence inside and out, and how we feel and how we can take care of others. At the very, very end of the day, though, I always just say don't we just want to look good naked? I mean, we all just want to look good naked. So it's about building confidence and moving and feeling better about ourselves so that we can be better for other people that we're around. So thank you so much. I've had a blast.
Same here. And thank you everybody for showing up, and have a great evening. Go get your workout in, drink your smoothie, and we will see you on the next one. Signing off.
Absolutely.